So this week, in the book of Ruth, the women really take control of the story. Has anyone ever seen the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding? Yeah, it's a good movie. Well, the main character is a young lady by the name of Tula. And Tula has been working in the family restaurant, and she wants to not work in the family restaurant any longer. She wants to go and take some classes at the local college. And when she asks her dad, he immediately shoots her down. And she goes and talks to her mother about it and says, Mom, Dad is so stubborn. He has this whole, the man is the head of the house thing. Whatever he says has to go. And Tula's mom looks at her and says, Tula, the man may be the head of the household, but the woman is the neck. We can turn his head any way we want it to go. Well, this week in the book of Ruth, the women are turning the head of the patriarchy any way they need it to go. So let's think about what's happening thus far in the book of Ruth. We have these two women, Naomi and Ruth. Ruth is her daughter-in-law. They are both widowed. And they're living in the land of Moab when the famine hits, and they need to return to Bethlehem because it's no longer safe for them in the land of Moab. And so they go to Naomi's homeland of Bethlehem, where there is food. So it's a better chance for them to survive. Now, some things we need to remember when we're talking about Ruth is that she's kind of got two things going against her. One, she's a woman in a very patriarchal society, and she's a widowed woman at that, and she is a foreigner. Now, at this time, there was no one more vulnerable in society than a widowed woman with no children. Maybe an orphan that had no family whatsoever, but they are among the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. Because at this time, for a woman to have any sort of security, it was believed that she needed a husband and children to keep her safe. Now, both Ruth and Naomi are widows. No husband, no children. On top of all of that, Ruth is also a foreigner. She is from Moab. And under the best of circumstances in the life of the people of Bethlehem, a Moabite woman was seen at least with a little bit of leeriness, or at least a little worried about her at best, but at worst, she was completely cast out of their society. In fact, at this time, it was believed that a good, upstanding Jewish man was to marry only a good, upstanding, worthy Jewish woman. And if an upstanding Jewish man married something other than an upstanding Jewish woman, he was encouraged to divorce that woman if she was a foreigner and marry a local Jewish woman instead. So Ruth has a lot going against her. Last week, we learned about how she came to know Boaz, a good, upstanding Jewish man in that society. And how, because of her hesed is the Hebrew word that means loving kindness. It's also this concept of devotion and loyalty. There was one scholar that I heard describe it as love in action. Because of Ruth's hesed towards Naomi, Boaz has praised her for her great worth. And now, this week, it is time for Naomi and Ruth to see if they can get Boaz to practice hesed, loving kindness, devotion, loyalty, love in action towards Ruth and Naomi. He might need a little encouragement. The women here are turning his head towards what he's supposed to be doing. Now, it's a big deal about what's happening in chapter 3 of the book of Ruth. It is the culmination of the harvest. And this is such a big deal. One podcaster I listened to described it as if we were to combine Christmas, New Year's, and Easter all together in one night, that is the celebration that is happening here in the book of Ruth. Think about how important this harvest was to them. You know, in that day and age, if you were hungry, you didn't just hop over to Skinner's or depend on Amazon Pantry to bring you some food. You had to grow it, you had to harvest it, and you had to process it in order to eat. That's what they were celebrating, all this hard work that had come to fruition. But what's more than that, back in those days, only 1 out of 3 harvests would provide one a bounty that was good enough to help everyone survive without work. So 30% of the time, they would have a bountiful harvest. This was that bountiful harvest. And so, of course, they do what we all do when we want to celebrate good hard work. They had a party, right? Whenever we want to celebrate the culmination of hard work, we have a party. Do y'all not have parties? I have a party when we celebrate those things. Anyone else? Maybe? Sure, of course. We have food, we have drink, we have fellowship, we have a good time. And that is exactly what's going on here. And Naomi says we need to take advantage of what's happening here, of this great, good harvest. And so she tells Ruth to go, to put on her best clothes, to anoint herself, and to go to Boaz. He will tell her what to do. Naomi wants Ruth to do this so that Boaz, again, can be encouraged to have that hesed, that loving kindness, that love in action towards Ruth and towards Naomi so that their future will be secure. So even though the culmination of the harvest is a big deal, Naomi is hoping that tonight will be more than just that big deal. So Ruth does what her mother-in-law tells her to do, mostly. Not exactly, but mostly. She does put on her best clothes. She does anoint herself. She does perfume herself. She does go to the celebration of the harvest. She does keep an eye on Boaz. She does watch and wait for him to eat and to drink and to lie down. And then, okay, before I go into the end then, the next excerpt of this sermon might be a little bit adult in content. So if now is the time for you to go to the bathroom because you don't want to listen to that, or you don't want to hear someone else listen to that, now would be a good time. When I was in 4th grade, it was towards the end of the school year, and my teacher said that we could rent a movie to watch during class. And so our whole class came up with the idea of watching Teen Wolf. Michael J. Fox and Teen Wolf. If you don't know it, I highly recommend it. It really got shunned at the Oscars. I'm not sure why, but it was a great movie. I had seen it multiple times. And there's one scene in that movie where one of the actresses kind of dresses down to her undergarments. Now, I knew that scene was coming up as we're watching it in class. It was obvious that our teacher had not seen the movie, and she didn't know it was coming up. And I didn't want to be there when that scene came up, and we had to deal with her response to seeing that scene that we didn't tell her was in there. So at that moment I said, can I go to the bathroom? So if you need to go to the bathroom, now's the time. So Ruth marks where Boaz lies down, and she goes to him and does as Naomi tells her to do. She uncovers his feet. Now, sometimes in Hebrew, in the society, in the language, the word for feet means feet. Sometimes it means genitalia. Just one of those euphemisms. Sometimes it just means feet. Sometimes it means genitalia. So it could be that she just told Ruth to uncover Boaz's feet. And then she says, make yourself known to him. Now, again, in Hebrew, in the society, in the language, in the Old Testament, to be known to someone could mean just, hey, how you doing? Or it could be make yourself known to them. Like if you look through the genealogies that you see in Scripture, you'll know that so-and-so knew so-and-so, and they begat so-and-so. Now, by themselves, it could just mean that Naomi told Ruth to uncover his feet. It could just mean that Naomi said, you need to get to know him. But when you put two euphemisms of sexual connotation together, there might be something else going on. Oh, and by the way, that threshing floor that they're on, at the culmination of the harvest, at the big celebration, I think that's where they invented the motto, what happens in Vegas? What happens on the threshing floor stays on the threshing floor. If we look through Scripture, we see examples of sexual activity happening on the threshing floor. So, Ruth goes up to Boaz, uncovers his feet, whatever that means, makes herself known to him, whatever that means. He asks, "Who are you?" Now, remember, at this point, Naomi said to Ruth, "He will tell you what to do." Ruth explains who she is, and then she tells him what to do. "Take your cloak and lay it over me." Now, she also talks about him being the next of kin, or the closest of kin, or the kinsman redeemer. But we're going to talk about that next week. But for this week, let's just kind of focus on that idea about putting that cloak over you. Now, remember, depending on what she's doing, on how you read it, if she had just uncovered his feet, it's the middle of the night, he wakes up startled, he could have been cold. You ever woke up cold and needed a blanket? Yeah? I promise you I've done that. Our first night in the house in Kentucky that the church owned, the Manse, our first night there was a snafu with the movers. None of our furniture came in, so we used it as an opportunity to go buy a new bed. And we bought sheets. It was August. No need for a blanket. Well, in the middle of the night, I wake up, freezing cold, shivering. I look over and Lauren is shivering, but she's gone and gotten a towel and covered herself up with a towel. The only towel that we had. And so I go put on all the clothes I could find and discover that someone, trying to make sure the house wasn't too warm for us when we showed up, set the thermostat on 55. Woke up cold. So it could be that Boaz just woke up cold. And Ruth was cold too, and she said, "Just take that cloak and cover us both with it." Or there are examples in Scripture of that meaning marriage. Cover your cloak over someone as a sign of marriage. It's a good example. So it could be that Ruth is asking Boaz to marry her. Now, I know it's odd today to think about a woman asking a man to marry her. It was unheard of in this time. And also, when we think about that phrase of coming under the cloak, it's important to think back to something that Boaz said to Ruth the week before. If you remember, Boaz was impressed by Ruth's hesed, by her loving devotion, her love in action towards her mother-in-law, Naomi. And he says to her, "May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Now, our version of the text has Ruth saying, "Put your cloak over your servant." But in other translations, it's "place me under your wing." Just as Boaz has wished for Ruth to come under the comfort and the protection of God's wing, Ruth is reminding Boaz that she needs to come under the comfort and protection of his wing in that patriarchal society. So Ruth does what Naomi tells her to do, kinda. When it looks like Boaz isn't going to take the action he needs to take, that hesed, that love in action, that devotion towards Ruth, which would secure her future and her mother-in-law's future, she takes the initiative. She has to encourage him to move from wherever he is to do the right thing. That happens to us, right? Like, we tend to know the right thing to do. We don't always do the right thing. Sometimes we need just a little bit of encouragement to do the right thing. And that encouragement can come from all kinds of places. Many years ago, when my father went to his first Presbyterian meeting, he was new to being a Presbyterian. He went with my grandfather on my mother's side, Daddy Bob. Daddy Bob was a southern farmer who had been a Presbyterian his whole life, and just for full disclosure, his full name was Robert Lee Nance Jr. So my dad had a couple of ideas about what my grandfather's ideas were about. And at this Presbyterian meeting, they were voting on whether or not to ordain women. My dad didn't want to upset his new father-in-law, and so he knew how he was supposed to vote, He didn't know how my grandfather was going to vote. So he asked him on the way to the meeting. And Daddy Bob says, well, of course I'm in favor of ordaining women. You know, at the church, whenever there's a decision to make, the men come together, they talk about the problem, they talk about ideas about how to solve it, and then we go home and we talk to our wives, they tell us what to do, we come back to the church and we do it. Why not just cut out the middleman? Oftentimes, we know what we need to do. We know the loving kindness that God calls us to do. We know the right decisions to make, but we can't always make them. Sometimes we need just a little bit of encouragement from somewhere else to do the right thing. And sometimes we need to encourage others to do the right thing. Amen?